As the year draws to an end, I wanted to take a moment to look back at some of the best games we played decades ago. Not only at the games, but at the details and experiences behind them. The technical marvels, the sheer magic of being there when they were first released, and the community that we've built around preserving and enjoying them. This is our Retro Gaming Boss and the very best of 2025. And in this video, I'll share my personal favorite reviews of 6 classics from throughout the year. To kick things off, we're going back to where it all began for so many of us, with a revolution that started on 2 simple diskettes. Let's start with a journey back to 1993, to the experience that created the benchmark for a genre. In What It Really Felt Like Playing Doom in 1993, we relived the mission just to get the game running on your PC. Here's what I mean. I remember playing Doom in 1993 for the first time and being absolutely blown away, not just by the game itself, but by how different everything felt back then. The intensity and innovation of the game and the amount of sheer effort it took just to get it running. Today, we're traveling back to 1993 to rip and tear our way through what it was really like to experience Doom. Not the remake from 2016, but the original DOS version in all of its raw and unfiltered glory. Right now, you can buy Doom, download it, and be chainsawing imps within minutes. But in 1993, just getting Doom onto your computer was a bit of a mission itself. First, you had to track down a copy of those magical 2 shareware diskettes. Remember those? Just a taste of the game, teasing you with only the first few levels. No full campaign, just enough to get you hooked. And then, gotta buy the full version, they said. And multiplayer? Forget click and play. You almost needed a computer science degree, a prayer, and a LAN cable longer than your patience. But when it finally worked, pure magic. This, my friends, was PC gaming in 1993. No hand-holding, no instant gratification. Just you, your computer, and the thrill of making it work. So let's rewind and relive the era when booting up Doom felt less like starting a game and more like spending your day at NASA's Mission Control. You see, Doom wasn't just another game, it was a revelation. Before this, we had platformers and the like, and some pretty basic 3D adventures. Doom, it was fast, violent, and terrifyingly immersive. I first heard about it from friends at work who couldn't stop raving about it a little too much, I thought, about the demons, shotguns, and plasma rifles, and the enemies exploding into pixelated gore. Back in 93, it almost felt taboo, like something we shouldn't be messing around with. And watching them play was hypnotic. The eerie atmosphere, the relentless pace. I didn't know whether to be amazed or scared, but one thing was certain, I had to play it myself. And let's not forget, Doom wasn't just made, it was forged by legends. John Carmack's genius coding tapped into the power of home PCs, inventing programming methods to make the 3D world run on 90s hardware. John Romero's level design was sadistically brilliant, crafting mazes that felt like playgrounds from hell. Together with the rest of id Software, they crunched the hours, fueled by heavy metal, as they rewrote the rules of gaming. Modding? Doom invited it. Speedrunning? That was born here. It didn't just make a hit. They created a culture, and 30 years later, we're still living in it. Now before we dive deeper, if you're enjoying this nostalgia trip, consider subscribing. Your support helps me keep these retro throwbacks going. Now back to 1993. Getting Doom running on your home PC felt like a quest in itself. Step 1, the shareware discs, just 5 levels. A demo by today's standard, but back then, it was everything. I can't even tell you how many times I played through those levels over and over again. Of course, 5 levels weren't enough, so I saved up, drove to the computer store, and came home with a full set of install discs. Each one was a gamble, and you'd keep your fingers crossed and hold your breath as you wondered to yourself, would it complete the install or fail halfway through? And then came the hardware hurdles. Did your PC even stand a chance? A 66 MHz CPU? 8 whole megabytes of RAM? A 16-bit sound card? Jeez. I was a starving college student at the time, but luckily was able to commandeer my dad's computer he used for business. Little did he know that late at night, when I was supposed to be studying, I'd use it to open a portal to hell. Well, he probably did. Sorry, Dad. And when the setup was finally completed and actually worked, oh man, he waited for the ridiculously long Windows boot sequence to complete, and then fumbled around for a while with the WASD controls, getting used to your left hand on the keyboard and mouse on your right. And then you were right in the middle of the action. All the deafening shotgun blasts, the demonic groans, and the buckets full of adrenaline. I'd crank up the volume when my parents weren't home, half terrified they'd walk in and see me grinning in delight from ear to ear in the midst of all of the carnage. And if the single-player mayhem wasn't enough, then came multiplayer. LAN parties weren't just simple plug-and-play affairs. They were arcane rituals to the gaming gods. IPX settings, whatever those were, tangled cables, and sometimes hours of troubleshooting. But when it clicked, chaos and absolute glory. I once even skipped my uni class just to get fragged in multiplayer something like 412 times to a measly 32 of my own. And even though I sucked, playing it together with friends was unforgettable, and we loved every second of the action. And that music, the heavy metal and industrial soundtrack, raw like the powerful sounds of Alice in Chains cranked through a demonic amplifier. It really made the game. Without it, Doom just wouldn't have felt the same. Now for a quick break, if you're loving this, check out the description below for a playlist of more retro gaming deep dives. And the rest is history. As you surely know, Doom wasn't just a game, it was the start of a revolution that defined FPS games forever. Every shooter today owes it, well, just about everything. It proved PCs weren't just for spreadsheets, they were gateways to demon slaying. And I'll always wear it as a badge of honor to have witnessed it all firsthand back in the day. And even though today you can play Doom on your phone or even a smart refrigerator, back in '93 it was blood, sweat, and tears, blue screens of death included. So next time you load it up, take a second to appreciate how far we've come, and maybe thank those dusty little diskettes that started it all. So if you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane, smash that like button, share it with your fellow retro gamers, and subscribe for more. What was your first Doom memory? Let me know in the comments. And if you're new here, welcome to my channel. I'd like to invite you to subscribe for more feel-good retro gaming content. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing off, reminding you to keep your games old school. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. From the terror of hell's hallways, we then asked a much calmer, but far more profound question. Can a game actually achieve perfection? In What It Really Felt Like Playing Tetris in 1989, I argued whether a game could ever be perfect. If you think you know Tetris, then this might hit pretty close to home. I hear people talk all the time about their favorite games being perfect. That got me thinking, is it even possible for a game to actually be perfect? To understand that question, I checked the definition, which is to be the best possible type of something. It also means a state of excellence, considered unattainable. So being perfect is a pretty high bar, and in my mind, there's actually only a handful of games that should even be considered. One of those is Tetris, released over 30 years ago in 1989 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, which became one of the most influential and enduring games in history. Originally developed by Russian programmer Alexei Pajitnov in 1984, the NES version of Tetris brought the addictive, tile-dropping gameplay you know and love to a global audience, cementing its place as a video game icon. Even today, it's still enjoyed by millions, with numerous re-releases, including the brilliant Tetris 99. But is this really enough to be considered a perfect game? Let's take a closer look in this Retro Gaming Boss review of the original Tetris on the NES. The gameplay couldn't be simpler, right? The beauty of this game is how the pace constantly speeds up as you progress, challenging your reflexes and spatial reasoning to an infinite degree. All you have to do is keep the blocks from filling up the screen and make as many complete lines as possible. Sounds easy. Now it's one thing to sit here talking about the game, but entirely different to find yourself in the heat of the moment in the later stages, trying to keep your wits about you as the unrelenting pace quickens. With this in mind, I'd like to make my case for whether Tetris is a perfect game by showing exactly how it can feel during those moments. So without further ado, I'd like to share what I call the 3 phases of Tetris enlightenment. The first phase is when the blocks only fill up the bottom third of the screen. At the beginning, you take your time and ensure careful placement of the blocks. Between each, you take a little breath as you settle into the groove and get comfortable with the pacing. It's like taking a leisurely walk along the beach and pausing for a moment to look at the sparkle on the waves while you enjoy the cool wind blowing across your face. You play through a few levels in this phase, feeling good and smiling as you enjoy the catchy 8-bit soundtrack starting to loop over and over inside of your head. The second phase is when blocks fill up half of the screen, but there's still room to navigate them falling from above. As they rain down at a steady pace, you're ready for the challenge. Each line that blinks away and disappears gives you a pulse of joy. This reinforces your feeling of being in control as you begin to effortlessly complete more and more lines in a perfect state of flow. You move through each level, loving every moment. During the second phase, you've now entered into a meditative and almost zen-like focus that you want to go on forever. But just then, out of the corner of your eye, you see a notification flash on your phone, distracting you for a fraction of a second. This causes your finger to slip on the controller for the briefest instant, and before you know it, your focus has shattered into pieces like broken glass. After misplacing a few blocks, you try and regain your composure and power through. Your heart skips a beat when you realize that your lines from earlier now have faults that will be hard to recover. You lean in toward the screen and your palms begin to sweat as you enter the third and final phase of this perfectly diabolical game. Here, you've entered the land of no mistakes, an unforgiving zone where there's less than 30% of the screen still clear at the top. Through the force of sheer willpower, you push down a sense of panic bubbling up in your mind. Your brain's now automatically thinking 5 times faster than normal and multitasking to the extreme. Your eyes dart over to identify the next block to come down after your current one, while simultaneously planning out your next 3 moves to complete more lines. Anything to win back some breathing room and open space. At this point, the intensity is now stacking up as quickly as the blocks. You can feel every neuron firing at full speed, giving you a last-ditch, superhuman boost to stem the flood. Time narrows to a standstill as the music is blipping away ridiculously fast. Panic strikes as you hold your breath, mashing buttons faster and faster. And then, a heavy feeling descends when you recognize the inevitability that the final block of death will come to end your game soon. This experience is why I believe Tetris may be a perfect game. As you've seen, Tetris may very well be the pinnacle of game design and gameplay, and here's why. Its deliberate simplicity allows players to focus entirely on the gameplay. It is the perfect example of a less is more philosophy. There's no story, characters, or enemies to distract you here. It's more about competing with yourself as you push through the outer limits of your mind and capabilities. And what could be better than that? The beauty of Tetris is how it relies on a few core elements that create such a pure experience. It also perfectly balances challenge and reward. The instant hit of relief each time you clear out more lines provides a constant rush of accomplishment. The tension between the unrelenting pace and your ability to manage the fallen tetrominos is always thrilling. As you know, Phase 3 gets pretty intense, but always in a fun and exhilarating kind of way. Tetris is perfectly replayable. No 2 games are ever the same, with the randomness of the falling blocks keeping each session unpredictable and fresh. Whether you're playing casually for a short gaming break or jumping into a full-blown OCD play session for hours, Tetris never overstays its welcome. And finally, Tetris has a universal appeal. There's just something about this experience that transcends age, culture, and experience level that appeals to people from all walks of life. This X factor made it a staple of gaming culture and a hit with players of all backgrounds throughout the decades and around the world. So in the end, when we put up Tetris for contention as a perfect game, in my book, it comes pretty damn close. Let's weigh the final verdict against the criteria. Is it the best possible type of something? Absolutely. Has it attained a state of excellence considered to be unattainable? I think so. If Tetris isn't a perfect game, then I don't really know what is. But what about you? Is Tetris really the GOAT? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you enjoyed this game and review, then hit that like button and subscribe for more feel-good retro gaming. And also be sure to share your favorite memories playing your favorite version of Tetris in the comments below. Alright, my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out, and I'll see you on the next one. Now, while Tetris mastered simplicity, another game from the 32-bit era mastered complexity, bending new hardware into 3D worlds to create a legend. In The Reality of Tomb Raider on the PlayStation in 1996, we pulled the curtain back on the legend and took a forensic look at how a small team did the impossible. Let's take a closer look. Today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most audacious games of the original PlayStation era. A game that not only pushed the hardware but fundamentally bent it to its will, creating a new blueprint for 3D adventures in the process. We're talking, of course, about Core Design's 1996 masterpiece, Tomb Raider. But this isn't just a retrospective. For our community of tech enthusiasts and nostalgic gamers, this is a forensic investigation. If you were like me, you probably spent hours trying to figure out how this game world was actually created and brought to life. In this video, we're going to answer the question, how did a relatively small team in Derby, England, working with a console that had only 2 megabytes of RAM and a processor that your 2007 iPhone could run circles around, make a world that felt so vast, so immersive, and a character who became a global icon? This is the story of the ingenious optimization of technical smoke and mirrors, and how Tomb Raider showed the world what was actually possible on the PlayStation. I'll never forget the first time I booted this game up. It was Christmas of 1996. The system was new, the DualShock controller didn't even exist yet, and I was navigating Lara with the original D-pad. I made it through the caves level, and there was a moment, a specific moment, a haunting musical cue that fades into the sound of dripping water and Lara's footsteps. In that moment, the blocky polygons and the chunky pixels didn't matter. I wasn't looking at a video game, I was there. And I think that feeling, that alchemy of turning technical limitations into pure atmosphere, is what we're really here to explore today. I know we look back with rose-tinted glasses, but playing it again today, what's fascinating is how the developers managed to work around the limitations of the hardware to create that sense of awe. So let's begin by understanding the canvas that Core Design was working with. The PlayStation was a revolution, but a constrained one. Its heart was the R3000A CPU, clocked at a then impressive 33.8 MHz. But the real star of the show for 3D graphics was the Geometry Transformation Engine, or GTE. This was a coprocessor hardwired to do one thing incredibly fast, handle the vector mathematics for 3D graphics. It could crank out tens of thousands of polygons per second, but there was a catch. The PlayStation did not have hardware support for floating point operations, which are essential for rendering 3D graphics. But it used various techniques to approximate these features and still provide acceptable 3D graphics. The PS1 can still perform fixed point arithmetic, and using software emulation, floating point numbers can also be computed, although at a slower pace. This is the root of so many of the PS1's signature quirks. That's why polygons often look like they're wobbling or warping, because the precision for their positions in 3D space was limited. The system was essentially making educated guesses, and sometimes those guesses were a little janky. Add to this a paltry 2 megabytes of main RAM and a mere 1 megabyte of video RAM, and you start to see the puzzle that Core Design had to solve on a budget of just £440,000. They weren't just building a game, They were building a 3D game on a machine that was still learning what 3D was. Before we dive into it further, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is always here for a quick retro gaming break whenever you need it. I appreciate your support since it's the only way that YouTube will highlight my videos. The initial concept came from a young art school graduate named Toby Gard, who envisioned a game that mixed the first-person exploration of Ultima Underworld with the 3D characters of Virtua Fighter. He wanted to create an interactive movie, but one that wasn't restricted to pre-rendered video clips. The team, led by Gard and lead programmer Paul Douglas, knew they couldn't use any of Core's existing 3D engines for a project this ambitious. They had to build one from scratch. And their initial target wasn't even the PlayStation, it was the Sega Saturn, which, not coincidentally, debuted the first console release of this game. This decision fundamentally shaped the engine. The Saturn, for instance, only draws quadrilaterals or quads, which imposed a major constraint from the very beginning. And for months, the team struggled with the fundamental question: how do you get a character to interact with free-form 3D environments given the severe processing constraints? The breakthrough that Core came up with was the decision to build everything on a grid. This single choice made the entire project suddenly feasible. The game world was constructed from a series of rooms on a 3D grid, a design directly inspired by the multi-chambered layout of real-world Egyptian tombs, particularly the tomb of Tutankhamun. This grid-based system is the invisible skeleton that the entire game is built upon. This brings us to the most visible symbol of those constraints. Lara Croft herself. Ever wonder why Lara was so pointy? Her iconic triangle chest wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was a direct result of a brutally strict polygon budget. Lara's model is a masterpiece of minimalist engineering, built from the ground up by Toby Gard, using just over 300 polygons. As Gard himself noted, her chest was 2 triangles on either side and 2 quadrilaterals on the front, which was about as efficient as it could be done. He made a conscious trade. Less detail on her body allowed for more polygons on her head and face, ensuring that she had character. The developers at Core Design weren't just artists. They were architects of abstraction. They understood that in the low-poly world, silhouette was everything. By creating a distinct, recognizable shape, those blocky pigtails, the triangular torso, the long legs, they ensured that even in the darkest, most pixelated corridor, you could always tell it was Lara. This technical foundation had a profound impact on the gameplay itself, leading to what is now one of the most debated control schemes in history, the tank controls. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've all complained about them, but understanding the why completely reframes them. With the grid-based level design and fixed camera angles, a modern camera-relative control scheme would have been unplayable. Pressing forward would send Lara in a different direction with every camera cut, so they anchored the control to Lara herself. Forward was always forward from her perspective. This created a precise, almost chess-like movement system. This philosophy was a direct inheritance from the original Prince of Persia, a game the team cited as a major influence. Just like the Prince, Lara has a rigid set of moves with predictable outcomes. A standing jump always covers 2 tiles. A running jump covers 3. There is a deliberate delay between input and action, giving her a sense of weight and momentum. This turned platforming from a test of reflexes into a form of spatial puzzle solving, where success came from carefully planning out your route rather than twitch reactions. The clunkiness was deliberate. It was the only way to make the game work, and once you understood its logic, it gave you a pixel-perfect sense of control. Of course, a tomb wouldn't be very atmospheric if it were silent. The audio in Tomb Raider is another masterclass in working within its constraints. The PlayStation's CD-ROM drive allowed for high-quality streamed audio, which is why the game's haunting, English classical music-inspired soundtrack is so memorable. Core's audio team was given a mere 3 weeks to compose the entire score. Lacking a budget for a live orchestra, they created the iconic pieces using synthesizers. For the choral piece, where the depths unfold, they even created recordings of their own breathing to simulate the sound of a real choir. But the sound effects were a different matter. They had to be stored in that limited 2 megabytes of main RAM. The sound designer was also on a tight deadline, with about a month to create the entire game's soundscape. This led to a very sparse but incredibly effective audio design. Unlike most games of the era, music doesn't play constantly. Instead, limited musical cues are triggered at specific dramatic moments. For the majority of the game, the only sounds are the echoing thud of Lara's boots on stone, the specific grind of a block being pushed, the fearsome growl of a wolf, and the chilling silence of ancient ruins. This silence was just as important as the sounds themselves, building tension and making the world feel immense and lonely. Now let's talk about the infamous draw distance, or more accurately, the fog. That thick, soupy fog that seems to just hang 20 feet in front of you in every outdoor area. It wasn't an artistic choice for mood, it was a brutal, necessary culling technique. The PlayStation simply couldn't draw the entire level at once, so the developers used distance fog to hide the pop-in. As Lara moved forward, the level geometry was literally being drawn and erased just beyond the veil of that fog. It was a clever way to mask the system's inability to render long distances, and ironically, it ended up adding to the game's mysterious, claustrophobic atmosphere, even in wide-open areas. You never knew what was lurking in that mist. The camera was another monumental challenge. With controllers lacking analog sticks, giving players direct control wasn't an option. Instead, Paul Douglas programmed a dynamic, intelligent camera system that had to react to any possible circumstance. It featured 4 preset angles that would seamlessly switch depending on Lara's position, often framing the action for cinematic effect, while ensuring the player always had a viable view for platforming. A huge part of making this all work was the proprietary software built in-house. Core's genius programmers created a revolutionary room editor that allowed the level designers to build and test environments in minutes, not hours. This was a game changer. Instead of waiting for a 3D studio render, they could output a room, explore it immediately, and iterate rapidly. Level design was a collaborative process, with monthly meetings where the team would discuss concepts for levels like St. Francis's Folly, brainstorming the themed rooms and their puzzles. Alongside this, they also created a unique tool called the Anim Editor that allowed them to animate Lara's movement in real time by hand. Think about that for a minute. All of her running, shooting, leaping, even her graceful swan dives and grisly death ragdoll motions were painstakingly animated 1 frame at a time by hand. Wow. And the reason that hand animation rather than motion capture was used is that Core wanted uniformity and precise control of her movements, which just wasn't possible with the motion capture technology of the time. These 2 pieces of software were, in the words of the team, 10 to 15 years ahead of themselves, and were arguably as groundbreaking as the game itself. They were instrumental in bringing the game to life. Real quick, if you enjoy this content, I've put a link in the description below of a playlist of all of my other videos that you might also enjoy, so check it out and stick around for a while. As we've seen from the interplay of combining all of the technical elements together, the custom engine, the low-poly character, the grid-based levels, the tank controls, the sparse audio, and others, it allows us to see the complete picture. Tomb Raider is a game that succeeded in spite of its limitations, and in fact, is a game whose identity is forged by them. Every single one of these technical compromises directly contributed to the unique feel, the precise gameplay, and the unforgettable atmosphere that we remember so fondly. Core Designs didn't have the power to create the realistic world like we see in modern-day games today, so they used every trick in the book to create a believable one. They turned the PlayStation's weaknesses into stylistic strengths, And the legacy of this technical achievement is immense. Tomb Raider was the start of an enormous franchise that defined the 3D action-adventure genre. It immediately connected with players, selling over 7 million copies and turning around the fortunes of its publisher, Eidos, from a $2.6 million loss before the game's release into a $14.5 million profit. It proved that a compelling character and the masterful use of a new system's architecture could triumph over its limited graphical power. For me, the ultimate testament to its design came years later, long after I'd moved on to the PS2 and beyond. I found my old PS1 memory card, plugged it in and loaded up my save file, and there, in Croft Manor, with its blocky textures and chunky geometry, was that feeling again. The feeling of being in a place that shouldn't even be possible, crafted by developers who saw the walls of their technical prison not as barriers, but as a challenge to be overcome. They didn't just make a game for the PlayStation, they broke through what was possible at the time, and in doing so, they built a legend. What are your most vivid memories of the original Tomb Raider? Was it the first time you faced the T-Rex? The puzzle that stomped you for days? Or just the sheer atmosphere of those silent tombs? And what other games from the era do you think performed similar technical magic? Let's get that deep dive conversation started in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look into the tech behind the classic, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. And of course, the PlayStation wasn't just about adventure, it was also the birthplace of a new kind of terror. And one game in particular wrote the rulebook on how to give a new generation nightmares. In the top 10 terrifying moments of Resident Evil 1, we counted down the art of the scare in that iconic mansion as we ventured into the corridors of pure terror. Join me as we revisit the Spencer Mansion, if you dare. Welcome to Resident Evil on the Sony PlayStation from 1996. This wasn't just a frightening romp through a creepy mansion, it was Capcom creating a new standard of atmospheric tension, nerve-wracking scares, and unforgettable moments that still haunt gamers today. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 scariest moments. Every turn meant a new terrifying encounter, and the only thing more horrifying than the mutated monsters might have been the game's horrendous and cheesy voice acting. From fighting through zombies to facing off against hideous creatures that were created in bioweapon experiments, Resident Evil is a survival horror classic. So turn off the lights as we get ready to relive the moments that make you wish you'd just chosen to play a relaxing puzzle game with your cat instead. Resident Evil follows STAR's Alpha Team members Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield as they're forced to explore a mysterious mansion in the Arklay Mountains near Raccoon City. What begins as a simple investigation into a string of murders quickly spirals into a nightmare when the team becomes trapped inside. They're forced to survive against zombies, rabid dogs, and other experimental horrors. What made this game legendary were the constant sense of vulnerability. You never knew what was around the next corner, and with combat deliberately slow and clunky, every encounter was a gamble. Resident Evil has the perfect recipe for both terror and nostalgic charm. The center of the game, the Spencer Mansion itself, is as much of a character as the monsters. It was ostensibly built as a luxurious estate for Umbrella Corporation executives, but in reality, it was hiding a secret underground lab. In 1998, it became ground zero for a T-virus outbreak that turned pets into killers and humans into the Walking Dead. STARS was sent in to deal with it, and the events that followed became the stuff of survival horror legend. Now, let's dive into the top 10 scariest moments from Resident Evil. Number 10. Once ordinary Dobermans, these T-virus-infected Cerberus hounds turned into relentless killing machines. The moment you're calmly walking down a hallway, only to have them suddenly crash through the windows with snarls and snapping jaws, is gaming history's most infamous jump scare. Your heart skips, and you instantly realize nowhere is safe in this mansion. Speed is your only defense here. A handgun works, but the shotgun is the dramatic choice. Number 9. Resident Evil redefined zombies for an entire generation. These weren't corpses clawing out of their graves. They were living humans twisted into cannibalistic shells by the T-virus. The first time you stumble into that room and see one hunched over a body, slowly turning towards you with its lifeless eyes, it's pure nightmare fuel. That iconic groan and shuffling movement sets the tone for the entire game. It's a fight or flight moment no player ever forgets.
Barry?
What is it?
Watch out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of this.
Trivia moment. Resident Evil was originally envisioned as a modern reimagining of the 1989 horror title Sweet Home. The game underwent multiple transformations during its development. Initially planned as a Super Nintendo title in 1993, it was later reworked into a fully 3D first-person game for the PlayStation in 1994, before ultimately being released as a cinematic third-person survival horror experience. Number 8. In most games, the front door means safety and escape. Not here. Try it in Resident Evil, and instead of freedom, you get another damn Cerberus leaping straight at your face. It's a cruel trick that drives home the message there's no easy way out of this nightmare. Every attempt to escape only drags you deeper in. Number 7. Not every scare in Resident Evil comes from fangs and claws. In one quiet room, you find a spooky old grand piano with the sheet music for Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. When you play it, the haunting melody echoes through the empty mansion, and then the wall shifts, revealing a hidden passage. It's eerie, beautiful, and unsettling all at once. It's a perfect match for the setting of the game. Even this music becomes a tool of suspense. Number 6. At first glance, they're just birds, but these T-virus-infected crows are the definition of death from above. They swoop, peck, and claw with relentless fury, turning hallways full of creepy artwork into a deadly gauntlet of feathers and blood. Luckily, they go down easily with a single bullet. The real fear comes from being caught off guard, wasting your precious ammo, and realizing even the wildlife is just waiting for its chance to take you down. Number 5. Just when you think you've seen it all, the game throws giant spiders the size of large dogs at you. Their hairy legs and venomous fangs make every skittering sound echo like a death sentence. Trapped in the tight hallways with them, you can almost feel the walls closing in as they skitter across the ceiling. It's claustrophobic chamber horror at its finest, and proof that the Umbrella Corporation never met a creature it couldn't ruin. Trivia moment. Resident Evil earned widespread acclaim for its graphics, gameplay, sound design, and immersive atmosphere, though it faced some tough criticism for its dialogue and voice acting. The game became a global bestseller, eventually becoming the highest-selling PlayStation title of its era. By December 1997, it had sold roughly 4 million copies worldwide, generating over $200 million in sales. Number 4. Water levels in games are already nerve-wracking enough, but Resident Evil takes it further by throwing in freakish, mutated sharks into the flooded guardhouse. One splash, one flash of jagged teeth, and you're in panic mode. Moving through the water while these things lurk beneath the surface makes every step feel like it's your last. It's a primal fear, Humans were never meant to fight sharks, let alone undead zombie versions. Number 3. Just when you think zombies are the worst the mansion can throw at you, Umbrella introduces the Hunter Alpha. These reptilian-human hybrids are faster, stronger, and crueler than anything else you've fought. They leap across rooms, slice with razor claws, and if your health is low, they'll put you down in an instant. They're intelligent weapons designed to hunt, and their arrival turns the game into a deadly race for survival. Number 2. Imagine a giant, venomous snake bred to be the ultimate predator, slithering through the mansion and devouring anyone unlucky enough to cross its path. That's the Yawn. The first encounter is terrifying enough, but the rematch or deathmatch is even worse. It stalks and lunges out with lightning speed, and by the time you finally take it out, it's clear that you've faced one of Umbrella's cruelest creations.
How about going down to check by yourself? I have a rope here.
Oh, do you? Well, then I'll try to go down using the rope.
Trivia moment. In 2004, Resident Evil was ranked 37th in Retro Gamer's list of top retro games of all time, with the magazine describing it as one of the finest horror-themed games ever. They also noted that with its shocks, surprises, and wonderfully cheesy B-movie dialogue, Resident Evil was the video game equivalent of the film Night of the Living Dead. It later earned a spot in the 2008 Guinness World Records Gamers Edition for having the worst game dialogue ever. Additionally, Stuff magazine ranked it as the third best PlayStation game of all time.
1. Go.
Number 1. Designed as the ultimate, unstoppable bioweapon, when it bursts out of its holding tank, it feels like the Grim Reaper has just arrived. You can't just kill him outright, no. You survive just long enough to escape.
Can't control what it does.
Umbrella's failed attempt of a super soldier stalks you through the finale, culminating in a desperate last stand on the helipad.
It's coming! Jill! Kill that monster! You're our Amazon, Jill!
Only a rocket launcher has the final word. Resident Evil's scariest moments have stuck with gamers for decades. From jump scares to relentless bosses, this PlayStation classic delivered fear in ways we'd never seen before. If you have your own favorite terrifying moment, drop a comment and share your story. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more nostalgic dives into the games that shaped our childhoods and, in this case, our nightmares. Because in Resident Evil, it's not just the monsters outside that you need to fear. Alright, my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. While survival horror tested our nerves, another genre tested the very limits of an entire console. What I'm about to show you next is a masterclass in squeezing every drop of power from misunderstood hardware. The most profound of our technical deep dives this year took us into the heart of an underdog. Alien vs. Predator on the Atari Jaguar explored how Rebellion pushed the complex chipset of the system to its limits. The year is 1994, and the Atari Jaguar has just hit the store shelves, proclaiming the title of the first 64-bit gaming console. And like the 3DO, both attempted to make a name for themselves in the ultra-competitive video game industry that was locked in a tug-of-war between Nintendo and Sega. Among the Jaguar's relatively small library, one game stands out as a technical marvel: Alien vs. Predator. Developed by Rebellion, this first-person shooter was way ahead of its time, delivering an atmospheric and terrifying experience that pushed the system to its limits. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the tech behind this fan favorite. Released in October 1994, Alien vs. Predator was one of the games that helped the Jaguar stand out, offering an experience that rivaled the big hitters of the era. The game's technical prowess, innovative mechanics, and gameplay depth made it an instant classic, and something that would be remembered fondly by those who owned the console. In addition to a favorable reception from critics, Alien vs. Predator became the Jaguar's killer app, with a worldwide total of approximately 300,000 copies sold.
Disengage.
As we begin our exploration, I'd like to point out that this video is divided into two parts. First, we'll discover the technology that brought this game to life, why it was so impressive for its time, and how it holds up today. In the second part, we'll dive into some hypothetical what-if scenarios, imagining how the game could have been even better if it had been released on the Atari Jaguar CD. So get ready to totally geek out with me for a while in this retro gaming boss deep dive of Alien vs. Predator for the Atari Jaguar.
Let's rock!
Before we can understand the technology of the game itself, we need to take a quick look at the system behind it. Marketed as the first 64-bit console, the Jaguar was a technical powerhouse on paper, but its architecture was, well, let's just say, a bit complicated. Here's a quick rundown of the Jaguar specs. It had one Motorola 68000 CPU running at 13.3 MHz. This 16-bit processor was the main chip that handled game logic, enemy AI, and such. Additionally, the console featured two custom 32-bit RISC coprocessors, also for Motorola, running at 26.6 MHz each. These handled the graphics, sound, and math coprocessing. Those chips were commonly referred to as Tom and Jerry, and served as the graphics processing unit and digital signal processor. The Jag also had a custom Blitzer chip that was used to move game data across the system's 64-bit system bus, and yes, this part really was 64-bit. This unique combination of 16, 32, and 64-bit components gave the Jaguar extra power and flexibility, at the cost of being more difficult to program for. According to some who've developed on the system, at its best, the Jaguar was good at multitasking, with its 68,000 CPU managing logic operations, while the rendering of graphics was offloaded to the GPU, and the audio was processed by the DSP. It's also important to recognize that the Jaguar was designed during a transition period from when gaming consoles entered the 5th generation and started to move from 2D to 3D graphics. While the Jag's architecture really excelled at 2D games, it also featured some early 3D capabilities. And while this all sounds great in theory, as we'll see, this complexity became a limitation on certain aspects of Alien vs. Predator's performance. To wrap up on the specs, the Jag also featured 2 MB of RAM and supported the special VGA display mode with a resolution of up to 640 by 480 pixels, although most games ran at the lower resolution of 320 by 240 pixels. It also had a 24-bit true color palette and 16-bit stereo CD quality audio to produce the game's excellent sound effects. Despite the 64-bit marketing, the Jaguar's performance really depended on how well developers could harness its multiprocessor design. While some of the system's other games struggled with optimization, as we're about to see, Rebellion forged new ground to maximize the system's capabilities with Alien vs. Predator. AVP wasn't just another shooter, it was a technical leap forward in first-person shooter games on the console format. Let's break down how this game made the most of the Jaguar's potential. Its most visible feature was the use of digitized graphics within a straightforward 3D world. The game also provided the choice of 3 different playable characters, the alien and predator of course, and also a colonial marine. Each of these characters had unique abilities, objectives, and gameplay strategies, which offered radically different gameplay experiences. Here's the breakdown. The Predator's campaign is considered by many to be the easiest of the 3. Its mission is to kill the alien queen and claim her skull naturally. The Predator can use its cloaking technology to become invisible to Marines, but not aliens. Killing enemies while uncloaked increases the Predator's honor, which unlocks more powerful weapons like a combi stick and shoulder cannon. The Colonial Marine campaign provides a middle ground of gameplay challenge. As Private Lance J. Lewis, your mission is to escape the spacecraft Golgotha, which has been overrun by both aliens and predators. You must find weapons and other items to survive while avoiding enemy attacks.
What on earth got a hold of this guy?
Computer engaged.
The Marine uses a helmet HUD to display ammo and health, adding to the immersion, especially with how the motion tracker really ratchets up the suspense, just like in the Aliens movie. And finally, the Alien campaign is considered the hardest of all. The goal is to rescue the alien queen that's being held in the Predator spacecraft, while killing colonial marines and predators along the way. One of the game's unique gameplay mechanics is that the alien can't heal, but it can cocoon fallen marines. If the alien dies, a cocooned marine will then spawn a fresh new alien, letting you continue on from that location. The alien also uses air ducts to travel between levels since it can't use the elevators. One of the most memorable aspects of the overall experience is AVP's visual effects, which were key in creating the game's atmosphere and tension. From the nearly photorealistic graphics of the game environment, to the Predator's thermal vision and the muzzle flashes spraying out of the Marine's arsenal of weapons, the visuals are undeniably striking. The texture mapping of the walls, floors, and ceilings were also rendered at higher resolution compared to those in other Jaguar titles, making it easily one of the best-looking games on the system. Before we go further into the section about the technologies used to create AVP, I want to put a bit of a disclaimer out there that some of the following details are anecdotal and based on the best and most credible information I could find online from a variety of different sources, including various interviews with the game's lead producer, and while I wasn't part of the development team, I believe the following explanation does get most of the technical details right. And if you catch any oversights, then please let me know about them in the comments below. And if you're interested in hearing a longer format explanation directly from James, then check out the link to his presentation in the video description below. Now I've got to give some huge kudos to the dev team for how they brought to life AVP's stunning graphics. Breaking new ground, they boldly innovated novel approaches, such as creating custom tile panels for the environmental textures and for using model figurines to create the character sprites. Production sketches were first created for the characters and environmental tiles, and then the developers built a set of real physical tiles in 5 by 5 inch squares that were made from latex, wax, and resin, and airbrushed to add details. These tiles were then photographed using a 35mm camera and digitized to be used as in-game textures on the walls. Similar materials were used for the character figurines, some of which were custom made specifically for the game. The character animations were filmed using stop-motion animation, which was then digitized to create the sprites. The quality of the graphics that were a result of these innovations made Alien vs. Predator look even better than some early PC shooters and far ahead of most console-based FPSs at the time. Rebellion's development team also worked directly on-site with the Jaguar hardware engineers to fix certain technical issues. Rebellion and Atari collaborated to create level maps, story work, and sound effects. And while Rebellion spent a lot of time and effort to compress the game to the JAG's standard 2MB cartridge size, lo and behold, about a month from the game's completion, Atari agreed to double the cartridge size to 4MB. While that was ultimately the right decision, a lot of development effort could have been saved if they were able to have used the 4MB cartridge to begin with. In any case, all of the game's graphics were compressed by using an Atari adaptation of the well-known JPEG format, codenamed JagPeg, which compresses art assets with an 8:1 ratio without any loss of quality. Before I forget, I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is always here for a quick retro gaming break whenever you need it. I appreciate your support, since it's the only way that YouTube will highlight my videos and help my channel to grow. So how did Rebellion pull all this off on such a tricky system? This requires an understanding of the technical trade-offs that were made to balance the game performance with the available capabilities of the console. They were able to efficiently use the system's co-processors, the Tom and Jerry chips, for handling the visual rendering and audio, thereby freeing up the 68,000 CPU for other tasks such as the AI and gameplay logic. According to notes from the developers, the AI was actually the most complicated part of the entire game, with over 256 different strategies that could be used by each enemy character. This complexity, however, caused an overall performance hit, the most noticeable of which was the game running on average at only 10 to 15 frames per second. While that's much lower than the silky smooth frame rates that we're used to today, at the dawn of 3D console gaming, this was considered a reasonable sacrifice and a fair trade-off to accommodate the texture-mapped environments and higher resolution graphics. The enemy AI also had some issues, such as aliens occasionally getting stuck behind tables and other pathfinding glitches. While annoying or even a bit comical, this was also kind of the norm in other early 3D games at the time due to limitations of available processing power. I've also read many comments about the AI code itself being a bottleneck since it was not well optimized, which caused the frame rate to suffer more than it should have, and I can only imagine how much more enjoyable it would have been if it had a better overall frame rate. I've also read other comments from developers that the idea of AVP was not intended to be a fast action FPS like Doom, but instead was meant to make you think carefully and move strategically, which puts a different type of pressure on the player and contributes more to the atmosphere and immersion. The other side of that argument, I guess, is that sure, it's easy to say that as a cover for the game's low frame rate. So, I'd like to ask you, what did you think? Could the Jag's power have actually provided a smoother frame rate in the game? Additionally, like other early FPS games such as Wolfenstein 3D and the original Doom, the player's movement and aiming was limited in a horizontal plane only, which is to say you can rotate around the x-axis, but don't have any freedom to move on the y-axis or vertically. This trade-off was made since it was much less computationally intensive, allowing Rebellion to focus on the quality of textures rather than the complexity of the architecture within the game. All that said, there are two significant differences between AVP on the Jaguar and Wolfenstein on the PC. First, AVP has texture-mapped walls, floors, and ceilings, but Wolfenstein only has textures on the walls. Also important to note is that AVP uses depth queuing, where things get darker the further away they are from you. And while this feature was easily done on the Jaguar, it was much harder to perform on other hardware. The Jaguar was also able to rotate, scale, skew, and lighten, darken graphics in a single operation, given the capability of its GPU. Another trade-off was the color palette. The main game ran in 16-bit color mode, however, the cinematics still rendered in full 24-bit true color. Using a limited color mode relieved some of the workload on the GPU and reduced the game data taking up less space in RAM. AVP also utilized the Jag's Blitter chip to stream textures onto the game's surfaces more efficiently. In the audio department, the DSP was used to great effect, handling 3D positional audio, which made the creepy sounds of the aliens hissing directional. Many of the audio effects and voice samples were sourced from the Alien and Predator films and were very high quality, which were crystal clear and immediately believable. And while there wasn't any in-game music aside from the cinematics, this game relied heavily on its use of atmospheric sound effects, which succeeded due to its strong audio design. This all created a foreboding mood that made the labyrinthine hallways feel that much more threatening. From the Predator's creepy laughter and howls to the full auto blast of your machine gun and the skittering sound of facehuggers running across the floor, and even the mundane hum of the ship's mechanical systems and elevators, gave you the unmistakable feeling of being right in the middle of a real place, caught up in a deadly crossfire between the interstellar species. As a funny bit of trivia, The alien shrieking sound was actually created from an audio recording of one of the sound engineer's baby daughter, which was then sped up and manipulated to form that unmistakable and frightening sound effect. All of these features and gaming goodness was then packed into a cartridge that was literally brimming full of game. There was literally no space left to add any other features. Everything was compressed to its absolute limit, and the game still filled the entire cartridge memory, except for a trivially small 3 bytes remaining, which in and of itself is a pretty remarkable technical accomplishment. You definitely got your money's worth on this one. So despite the technical wizardry showcased in AVP, there were some aspects that still felt a bit lacking. This included the limited draw distance that was used to hide pop-in, and was a common trick on the Jaguar and other systems at the time, like the Sega Saturn and even early PlayStation games. There was also no multiplayer mode, which is thought to be due to memory constraints, and is something that we'll revisit in the second part of this video about some additional features that were planned for AVP's sequel. Something that always felt like a thorn in the side was the game's auto-mapping, which would reset each time you transitioned from one level to another. And while the auto-mapping was a really nice addition, it became frustrating if you took a wrong turn and then re-entered a prior area, which would make your map essentially disappear. And one of the most frustrating technical elements to me personally is AVP's limited save functionality. Enemies would respawn when you reload your game in areas that you had previously cleared, and item placement within each level was randomized as well, which sometimes made the gameplay turn into a bit of a slog. This is since the cartridge was only allocated somewhere around 256 bytes for save data. Yes, I said bytes, not kilobytes or megabytes of storage space, meaning that all that could be saved was your player class, location, and weapons, ammo, keys, and all of the enemies and items would respawn upon loading. Related to storage limitation on the cartridge media format is that some of the enemies didn't have images of them moving left or right or back, but only had one front-on view that stayed the same despite your movement around them. It also felt like there weren't enough various types of different enemies, which kind of made certain stretches of gameplay feel a tad boring. We also need to talk about the game controls. This game was released before analog controllers became the norm, and relied on the traditional D-pad to navigate through the 3D corridors. Don't get me wrong, the controls aren't bad overall, but in comparison to playing using mouse and keyboard, the controls in AVP felt a bit sluggish, which made it harder to move quickly and precisely, especially when the action heated up. Despite these compromises, it's clear to see that AVP did a good job overall balancing its ambition as a game with the technical realities of the system, and what it did bring to the table made it the Jaguar's most immersive and visually impressive game. So, does AVP still hold up today? In my mind, here's why it's still impressive. Atmospheric design. Its visuals and creepy sound design still create an immersive and scary atmosphere and really pulls you into the experience. Innovative mechanics. Playing as either an alien, predator, or marine was groundbreaking at the time and provides tons of replay value. It's a fan favorite and cult classic. Many consider it to be the best game on the Atari Jaguar, and I can't help but agree. This title is the one that us Jag fans always like to show off to our friends. In terms of playing AVP today, it can still be enjoyed on the original Jaguar hardware, which is a real treat, but can be an expensive proposition, but provides the most authentic experience.
Man, game over, man. It's game over.
Or you can try it out in emulation. Fortunately, Jaguar emulators like Big Pimu run the game smoothly and are a great way to get a taste of what it felt like to play this classic back in 1994. I'll leave the link in the description below pointing you in the right direction if you want to give it a go. There's also been a robust homebrew scene with modders who've enhanced the game with features like widescreen support and high-definition graphics, bringing the spirit of the original closer to modern-day expectations. Now before we move into the second section of this video, if you enjoy this content, I've put in a link in the description below of a playlist of my other videos that you might also enjoy. So check it out and stick around for a while. Part 2. What could have been. So as we've seen with some of the limitations of the original AVP, as revealed in interviews with Rebellion developers, there was still significant untapped potential in this title. Atari had plans for a CD version, with the speculatively titled Alien vs. Predators 2 Annihilation, but that was cancelled shortly before the company discontinued the Jaguar platform. So, in the spirit of good fun, let's imagine what potential improvements could have been made in a CD version of this game that would have been the ultimate version of AVP on the Jaguar. The following suggestions can be split into two primary aspects, the first being upgrades to the game engine itself and other various technical enhancements. To start with, this would include the use of 24-bit true color graphics, higher texture resolution, dynamic lighting and shadow effects, and more efficient coding throughout. Further technical improvements could include smoother frame rate and animations, and more complex game environments with multi-level rooms with stairs, curved hallways, pit traps, and the like. A couple of final items for this wish list would include improved pathfinding and enemy AI by utilizing a programming method referred to as finite state machines. That would result in more lifelike and challenging interaction with enemies. So now that we've outlined our hypothetical improvements to the game's tech, let's turn to some creative ideas for how that could have expanded the gameplay itself. What I would really like to have seen are some new enemy types and AI personalities for the aliens, with a rare warrior class that is faster and smarter, along with a drone class which are slower and weaker variants, but far more numerous and attack in large swarms. Given the standard alien the ability to crawl on walls and ceilings like in the movie would have added so much to the gameplay variety and strategy. Lastly, having dead bodies burst open with face huggers would have been a gruesome and terrifying improvement. For the predators, this could include elder predators with greater combat capabilities, stats, and more powerful weapons. Also, adding an auto-tracking cannon to the shoulder cannon would provide targeting that's more accurate to the film. Also, adding a taunt system for the predator to intimidate its prey would have been a hoot. For the Marine, there could be different ranks that populate the game world, including NPC officers, medics, androids, each with their own unique behaviors and skills. For the Marine's arsenal of heavy weaponry, I'd love to get my hands on a grenade launcher for the pulse rifle that has an area of effect blast radius. Also, the smart gun could have auto-aiming functionality, and the flamethrower could create lingering fire effects when you hose down the enemies in ribbons of flame. Moving right along to my wish list of environmental improvements and other quality of life enhancements includes full motion video cutscenes instead of the text intro and endings. Video logs could have replaced the text logs with narrated or acted video clips. More furniture, including desks, lockers, and facehugger tanks, shaking elevators, disappearing alien blood, randomized sleeping aliens to introduce an ambush mechanic, expanding the levels with more textures, variants, and scripted events. Imagine how great it would have been to have player link or modem support for cooperative and competitive gameplay. Imagine playing with your friends, you as the alien, them as the predator, stalking each other and fighting to the death online. A virtual reality version of the game that supported the never-released Jaguar VR headset was also under development, but never saw the light of day. And while all of these features would have been amazing to see in the game, we also need to look at it from a practical standpoint, through the lens of feasibility and technical constraints. While it's fun to brainstorm, some of these ideas may have still been overly ambitious for the Jaguar's hardware. Specifically, the limits of the overall processing power for complex AI and physics, and more advanced lighting effects that would have strained the Jaguar's GPU and CPU. Additionally, the overall coding efficiency would have needed further improvements. Some poorly optimized AI routines already caused performance issues in the original, so a complete rewrite would probably have been needed. So given this, we'd have to ask, would it have even been possible for the Jaguar to handle? I'd really like to hear your thoughts, so please be sure to drop a comment below. Even more than 30 years after its release, Alien vs. Predator stands as a testament to the Atari Jaguar's potential. Its atmospheric tension and diverse gameplay helped define a whole new type of console shooter. It's not only a relic of the past, it's a game that helped shape other future Alien vs. Predator games that were created by Rebellion Development later, as it extended the franchise with the Windows version of AVP in 1999. So I'd like to wrap up with a word about why I believe AVP is by far the best game on the Jaguar. Despite any imperfection, no other title matched the technical brilliance of AVP. So in the final analysis, while the Jag's library is relatively small and included some other titles that were hit or miss, AVP proved the system could punch above its weight. It wasn't just a great Jaguar game, it was a great game, period. If you're a fan of survival horror, first-person shooters, or just curious about the Atari Jaguar, Alien vs. Predator deserves a place on your radar. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button for me. What's your take on Alien vs. Predator? Or what could it have been, or should have been? Let's discuss. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. Why not go ahead and subscribe for more feel-good retro gaming content? Alright everyone, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out, reminding you to keep your games old school and to keep your pulse rifle locked and loaded. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. No year is complete without a trip to a galaxy far, far away. In Shadows of the Empire, Vehicles That Defined a Galaxy, we took to the stars and celebrated the feels of piloting the iconic Star Wars craft in this N64 classic. As a kid in the 80s, I grew up on Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back? That was the peak of sci-fi for me. Christmas mornings were made even better when I unwrapped the Hoth ion cannon and snowspeeder toys. Playing with those models was incredible, and I thought that was about as good as it could ever get for Star Wars action at home. But as a gamer, I dreamed at the chance of piloting these amazing vehicles from the movies that we all loved so much. Sure, the Atari 2600 Empire Strikes Back game from 1982 was about as basic as it can get, but even with the limited graphics of the time, it still managed to capture a slice of that Star Wars magic. The next year, Star Wars hit the arcade with its 3D wireframe graphics and that epic Death Star trench run. While those graphics look so primitive today, at the time, it felt like stepping into a galaxy far, far away. Fast forward over a decade later to 1994, when LucasArts began development of Shadows of the Empire in partnership with Industrial Light and Magic and Silicon Graphics, before the final chipset design of the Nintendo 64 was even completed. The expectations for the game naturally were sky high, and the hype was strong in this one. So put the Millennium Falcon aside for a minute. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire on the Nintendo 64 features a whole fleet of different vehicles that are just as cool and unique in their own right. So join me in this video as we explore the intergalactic rides that are featured in this classic N64 game, as we get behind the wheel of these iconic Star Wars vehicles. Released in North America in 1996 by Nintendo, this game takes place between the events of The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi, filling in the gap during a critical moment in the saga. The game follows Dash Rendar, a smuggler and mercenary hired by the Rebel Alliance, as he tries to thwart the sinister plans of Prince Sizor, a power-hungry crime lord with ties to the Empire. Sizor himself is secretly plotting to take down Darth Vader and seize control of the Empire, all while capturing Leia Organa and crushing the rebellion. Dash's journey sees him navigate through dangerous missions, battling Imperial forces, bounty hunters, and eventually confronting the deadly Sizor in his Skyhook fortress. When you first pick up the Nintendo 64 controller with its analog joystick, you immediately know this is some next-level stuff. The 3D graphics with their mid-90s fuzzy textures was taking you into a whole new era, and the sound! Shadows of the Empire used perfect digital samples of the original music and sound effects lifted straight from the movies. Everything looked, felt, and sounded like you were actually in the Star Wars universe. But as much as Shadows of the Empire captured the essence of the movies, it wasn't just about reliving the events in the films. The game's new characters, vehicles, and moments fit seamlessly into the expanded Star Wars canon. Now before we dive further into the vehicles that made it all so special, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is always here for a quick retro gaming break whenever you need it. I appreciate your support, since it's the only way YouTube will highlight my videos. Our first ride is in the Snowspeeder, right in the middle of the Battle of Hoth. The level opens with that backdrop of the icy tundra, and you'll immediately sense the weight and scale of those ginormous Imperial AT-AT walkers stomping across the battlefield. Flying the Snowspeeder wasn't just about speed, it was about tactics. You had to be precise with your harpoons to trip those walkers. And as a pilot, the Snowspeeder was always my favorite. I'd fly over the Hoth battlefield so many times just taking it all in. The thrill of reliving those unforgettable movie scenes, flying over and then under the walkers, was incredible. and the feeling of taking down one of those behemoths up close and personal was one of the most exhilarating moments I can remember in a game. But what made this level something special were the little touches, like the crystal clear John Williams score in the background, and for me, seeing those little flaps move up and down on your snowspeeder when banking and turning tightly sent a shiver of joy down my spine with its authenticity, reminding me of playing with my snowspeeder toy as a kid all of those years earlier. That attention to detail makes this game one to remember, and it's hard not to totally geek out and get lost in that experience. The second level takes us to the war-torn interior of the Rebel Alliance's Hoth base, and this level was also a visual treat, especially when you get an up-close look at the Millennium Falcon in the 3D world. Seeing the Falcon in all its glory with its unmistakable shape and weather details was another dream come true, and as you approach it, you can almost feel the vibrations of the blast from its engines, and then whoosh, it accelerates off with that unforgettable roar, soaring into the sky. The moment felt like something straight out of the movies, and it was hard not to be in awe. But the real challenge comes near the end of the level when you face off against an AT-ST boss. And while that's not a vehicle that you can pilot in the game, it feels just as imposing as its movie counterpart. I couldn't help but think how cool it would have been to hijack the AT-ST, Grand Theft Auto style, taking it for a joyride, stomping through the Empire's forces, and laying waste to everything in sight. But sadly, you have to take it down the hard way. Next up, you hop into Dash Rendar's ship, a new vehicle called the Outrider, in a thrilling escape from a pursuing Star Destroyer into an asteroid field. This level is a button-mashing blastathon as your ship weaves through asteroids where you gun down a whole pack of TIE fighters and even TIE bombers as you outrun the Imperial forces. That moment when you see the Outrider in full 3D detail in the expanse of space is breathtaking. And then that magical soundtrack kicks in, a perfect rendition of the theme from Empire Strikes Back. That music will forever be etched into my brain, and even today, each time I watch Empire, I'm instantly transported back to the intensity of this level. Next, we move on to the junkyard of Ord Mantell, where you get a first-hand look at the broken-down ship of the robotic bounty hunter IG-88 that was damaged when he crossed paths with Boba Fett while on the hunt for Han Solo. You only see his ship from a distance, but it looks massive, and the industrial environment sets the tone for the tension to come. Later in this level, you'll have a showdown with IG-88 himself, which is a great example of Shadows of the Empire, blending classic Empire lore with its own narrative. Now, we've got to talk about the speeder level in Hunting the Assassins. Was it ambitious? Sure. But for me, this one kind of fell flat. I was expecting something more like the speeder bike scene on Endor in Return of the Jedi. And while the concept of zooming across the desert landscape in a swoop bike should have been thrilling, the execution just felt off. The controls were a bit awkward, and the landscape was pretty flat and uninspiring. It was probably my least favorite vehicle-based level in the whole game. But it still had some interesting moments when you'd race across the dunes, jumping over Sarlacc pits, and bashing Xizor's minions into the walls, causing them to crash out in a ball of flames. Now, on the other hand, as you continue the search for Boba Fett, you come across a jetpack that helps you cross some big chasms that, to me, were some of the most innovative parts of the game. Mastering the jetpack controls was a bit tricky, but still fun. It felt like swinging on a pendulum in midair as you'd hover, dip, and power your way up and across platforms. It added a whole new layer of how you'd navigate the 3D world and was super unique, since it took full advantage of the N64's analog controller. And just then you stumble across the Imperial Lambda-class T-4A shuttle, Seeing this beauty take off in the cavernous 3D hangar for the first time was a treat. The texture mapping on the shuttle was gorgeous, and the level design made you feel like you're standing right in the middle of an actual Star Wars space opera playing out before your eyes. But the real highlight came at the end of the level, where you face off against the notorious Boba Fett. The battle occurs in a vertically tiered arena, and at one point, I almost caught motion sickness from the movement of that jetpack in the realistic perspective. And just when you think you've defeated him, the galaxy's baddest bounty hunter jumps into his ship, the Slave One, and the second phase of the battle begins. That menacing ship flying right up into your face was like stepping into a deleted scene from the film, and was a super impressive experience to see it up close in all of its detail. Now, after a few more not-so-impressive levels on foot, you make your final assault on Xizor's Skyhook space station. This level goes all out and brings it. As another Imperial Star Destroyer joins into the battle, you have full 3D control as you pilot the Outrider and can rocket past the immense battleship, skimming just meters above its surface. The Rebel fleet then sends in its X-Wing fighters to cover your six, and the Millennium Falcon swoops in to clear you a path as you dodge heavy fire and launch photon torpedoes at the autocannons defending the Skyhook. The atmosphere in this level is just so off the charts and hits a crescendo as the music swells to the epic proportions, with a full orchestra singing and backing up the cinematic action. And finally, you enter the Skyhook itself, flying through the interior corridors to deliver the final blow that takes out the reactor core, leading to a glorious explosion. It's the kind of finale you'd expect from a Star Wars movie, game, and is pulled off with incredible panache, and trust me, the feeling of this experience in a game was hard to beat back in 1996. So in conclusion, from the snowspeeders of Hoth to the final assault on the Skyhook, Shadows of the Empire delivered some of the most memorable Star Wars vehicle experiences of its time. While not every level hit the mark, the vehicles you could pilot provided an unforgettable ride through the Star Wars universe. Shadows of the Empire gave us a chance to experience Star Wars like never before, and the vehicles were a huge part of that. So, if you haven't played it, I highly recommend going back and taking it out for a spin. But that's just what I think. What other Star Wars vehicles do you wish were included in this game? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your views. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. And if you're new here, I'd like to welcome you to the channel and invite you to subscribe for more feel-good retro gaming content. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out, reminding you to keep your games old school. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. And so while this is my last video of 2025, here's a big shout out to the games that shaped us, not just as individuals, but as a community. When this channel started earlier this year, it was just a passion project I did in my spare time, but because of you, it's grown into something real. So thank you for trusting me with your time and your memories. As we head into 2026, I am more excited than ever to keep exploring these worlds together. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss, and I'll be right here, keeping our games old school. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.